Namgay Dllh by Rudyard Kipling. There came to the beach a poor exile of Erin. The dew on his wet robe hung heavy and chill, ere the steamer that brought him had passed out of hearin'. He was Alderman Mike introducin' a bill. American song. Once upon a time there was a king who lived on the road to Tibet, very many miles in the Himalayas. His kingdom was 11,000 feet above the sea and exactly 4 miles square, but most of the miles stood on end owing to the nature of the country. His revenues were rather less than £400 yearly, and they were expended in the maintenance of 1 elephant and a standing army of 5 men. He was tributary to the Indian government, who allowed him certain sums for keeping a section of the Himalaya-Tibet road in repair. He further increased his revenues by selling timber to the railway companies, for he would cut the great deodar trees in his one forest, and they fell thundering into the Sutlej River and were swept down to the plains 300 miles away and became railway ties. Now and again this king, whose name does not matter, would mount a ring-straight horse and ride scores of miles to Simla town to confer with the lieutenant governor on matters of state, or to assure the viceroy that his sword was at the service of the Queen Empress. Then the viceroy would cause a ruffle of drums to be sounded, and the ring-straight horses and the cavalry of the state, 2 men in tatters, and the herald who bore the silver sticks before the king, would trot back to their own place, which lay between the tail of a heaven-climbing glacier and a dark birch forest. Now, from such a king, always remembering that he possessed one veritable elephant, and could count his descent for 1,200 years, I expect, when it was my fate to wander through his dominions, no more than mere license to live. The night had closed in rain, and rolling clouds blotted out the lights of the village in the valley. 40 miles away, untouched by cloud or storm, the white shoulder of the Dllh, the mountain of the council of the gods, upheld the evening star. The monkeys sang sorrowfully to each other as they hunted for dry roots in the fern-wreathed trees, and the last puff of the day wind brought from the unseen villages the scent of damp wood smoke, hot cakes, dripping undergrowth, and rotting pine cones. That is the true smell of the Himalayas, and if once it creeps into the blood of a man, that man will at the last, forgetting all else, return to the hills to die. The clouds closed, and the smell went away, and there remained nothing in all the world except chilling white mist and the boom of the Sutlej River racing through the valley below. A fat-tailed sheep, who did not want to die, bleated piteously at my tent door. He was scuffling with the Prime Minister and the Director General of Public Education, and he was a royal gift to me and my camp servants. I expressed my thanks suitably and asked if I might have an audience of the king. The Prime Minister readjusted his turban, which had fallen off in the struggle, and assured me that the king would be very pleased to see me. Therefore I dispatched 2 bottles as a foretaste, and when the sheep had entered upon another incarnation, went to the king's palace through the wet. He had sent his army to escort me, but the army stayed to talk with my cook. Soldiers are very much alike all over the world. The palace was a 4-roomed, whitewashed and timbered house, the finest in all the hills for a day's journey. The king was dressed in purple velvet jacket, white muslin trousers, and a saffron, yellow turban of price. He gave me audience in a little carpeted room opening off the palace courtyard, which was occupied by the elephant of state. The great beast was sheeted and anchored from trunk to tail, and the curve of his back stood out grandly against the mist. The Prime Minister and the Director General of Public Education were present to introduce me, but all the court had been dismissed, lest the 2 bottles aforesaid should corrupt their morals. The king cast a wreath of heavy-scented flowers round my neck as I bowed, and inquired how my honoured presence had the felicity to be. I said that through seeing his auspicious countenance, the mist of the night had turned into the sunshine, and that by reason of his beneficence sheep his good deeds would be remembered by the gods. He said that since I had set my magnificent foot in his kingdom, the crops would probably yield 70% more than average. I said that the fame of the king had reached to the four corners of the earth, and that the nations gnashed their teeth when they heard daily of the glories of his realm and the wisdom of his moonlight prime minister and lotus-like director general of public education. Then we sat down on clean white cushions, and I was at the king's right hand. 3 minutes later he was telling me that the state of the maize crop was something disgraceful, and that the railway companies would not pay him enough for his timber. The talk shifted to and fro with the bottles, and we discussed very many stately things, and the king became confidential on the subject of government generally. Most of all he dwelt on the shortcomings of one of his subjects, who, from all I could gather, had been paralyzing the executive. "In the old days," said the king, "I could have ordered the elephant yonder to trample him to death. Now I must even send him 70 miles across the hills to be tried, and his keep would be upon the state. The elephant eats everything." "What be the man's crimes, Rajah Sahib?" said I. "Firstly, he is an outlander, and no man of mine own people. Secondly, since of my own favour I gave him land upon his first comings, he refuses to pay revenue. Am I not the lord of the earth above and below, entitled by right and custom to 1/8 of the crop? Yet this devil, establishing himself, refuses to pay a single tax, and he brings a poisonous spawn of babes." "Cast him into jail," I said. "Sahib," the king answered, shifting a little on the cushions, "once and only once in these 40 years sickness came upon me so that I was not able to go abroad. In that hour I made a vow to my God that I would never again cut man or woman from the light of the sun or the air of God, for I perceived the nature of the punishment. How can I break my vow? Were it only the lopping of a hand or a foot, I should not delay, but even that is impossible now that the English have rule. One or the other of my people," he looked obliquely at Director General of Public Education, "would at once write a letter to the Viceroy, and perhaps I should be deprived of my ruffle of drums." He unscrewed the mouthpiece of his silver water pipe, fitted a plain amber mouthpiece, and passed his pipe to me. "Not content with refusing revenue," he continued, "this outlander also refuses also the beggar." This was the corvée, or forced labour on the roads, "and stirs my people up to the like treason. Yet he is, when he wills, an expert log snatcher. There's none better or bolder among my people to clear a block of the river when the logs stick fast." "But he worships strange gods," said the Prime Minister deferentially. "For that I have no concern," said the king, who was as tolerant as Akbar in the matters of belief. "Each man to his own god, and the fire or mother earth for us all at last. It is the rebellion that offends me." "The king has an army," I suggested. "Has not the king burned the man's house and left him naked to the night dews?" "Nay, a hut is a hut, and it holds the life of a man. But once I set my army against him when his excuses became wearisome. Of their heads he brake 3 across the top with a stick. The other 2 men ran away. Also, the guns would not shoot." I had seen the equipment of the infantry. 1/3 of it was an old muzzle-loading fowling piece, with a ragged rust hole where the nipples should have been. 1/3 a wire-bound matchlock with a worm-eaten stock, and 1/3 a 4-bore flint duck gun without a flint. "But it is to be remembered," said the king, reaching out for the bottle, "that he is a very expert log snatcher and a man of merry face. What shall I do to him, Sahib?" This was interesting. The timid hill folk would as soon have refused taxes to their king as revenues to their gods. "If it be the king's permission," I said, "I will not strike my tents till the 3rd day, and I will see this man. The mercy of the king is godlike, and the rebellion is like unto the sin of witchcraft. Moreover, both bottles and another be empty." "You have my leave to go," said the king. Next morning a crier went through the state proclaiming there was a log jam on the river, and that it behooved all loyal subjects to remove it. The people poured down from their villages to the moist, warm valley of poppy fields, and the king and I went with them. Hundreds of dressed deodar logs had caught on a snag of rocks, and the river was bringing down more logs every minute to complete the blockade. The water snarled and wrenched and worried at the timber, and the population of the state began prodding the nearest logs with a pole in the hope of starting a general movement. Then there went up a shout, "Nmgy Dllh! Nmgy Dllh!" and a large red-haired villager hurried up, stripping off his clothes as he ran. "That is he, that is the rebel," said the king. "Now will the dam be cleared." "But why has he red hair?" I asked, "since red hair among hill folks is as common as blue or green." "He is an outlander," said the king. "Well done, oh, well done." Nmgy had scrambled out on the jam and was clawing out the butt of a log with a rude sort of boat hook. It slid forward slowly as an alligator moves. 3 or 4 others followed it, and the green water spouted through the gaps they had made. Then the villagers howled and shouted, and scrambled across the logs, pulling and pushing the obstinate timber, and the red head of Nmgy Dllh was chief among them all. The logs swayed and chafed and groaned as fresh consignments from upstream battered the now weakening dam. All gave way at last in a smother of foam, racing logs, bobbing black heads, and confusion indescribable. The river tossed everything before it. I saw the red head go down with the last remnants of the jam and disappear between great grinding tree trunks. It rose close to the bank, blowing like a grampus. Nmgy Dllh wrung the water out of his eyes and made obeisance to the king. I had time to observe him closely. The brilliant redness of his shock head and beard was most startling, and in the thicket of the hair wrinkled above high cheekbones shone 2 very merry blue eyes. He was indeed an outlander, but yet a Tibetan in language, habit, and attire. He spoke the Dllh dialect with an indescribable softening of the gutturals. It was not so much a lisp as an accent.